The first sound anyone noticed was the growl, low, strained, and completely out of place in the bright hallway of Lincoln Ridge Elementary School. It cut through the cheerful noise of children packing their backpacks, teachers calling out reminders, and lockers slamming shut. Ranger, a seasoned K-9 with years of service behind him, stood frozen in front of a large, colorful painting mounted on the wall near the art room. His muscles were tense, his ears alert, his dark eyes locked onto the artwork as if it were alive. His handler, Officer Mark Reynolds, tugged lightly on the leash, confused. Ranger had sniffed bombs, tracked missing people, and searched abandoned buildings. He had never reacted like this to a child's painting. The painting itself was innocent enough, or so it seemed. It showed smiling children holding hands under a bright sun, painted in bold, uneven strokes. Parents had praised it during open house. Teachers had called it a symbol of unity. It had been there for years, unnoticed, blending into the background of everyday school life. Yet Ranger growled again, sharper this time, pawing at the wall. A few students stopped and stared. One little girl clutched her backpack tighter, sensing something was wrong. "Easy, boy," Mark whispered, kneeling beside Ranger. He trusted this dog with his life. Ranger didn't make mistakes. The school had invited the K-9 unit for a safety demonstration, nothing more. No threats, no alerts, no reason for alarm. And yet, Ranger's nose was pressed hard against the bottom corner of the painting, his body trembling with urgency. Before Mark could react, Ranger lunged. The ripping sound echoed down the hallway as Ranger tore into the canvas with his teeth. Gasps erupted. A teacher screamed. Paint flakes fluttered to the floor like confetti, and behind the cheerful artwork, something dark and unnatural stared back at them. Ranger barked loudly, a warning bark, then stepped back, hackles raised. Behind the painting was a narrow opening in the wall. At first, it looked like nothing more than a poorly sealed maintenance gap. But as Mark stood and shone his flashlight inside, the truth unfolded slowly, horrifyingly. There were wires, old, tangled wires, running along the inside. A small metal box was bolted deep into the wall. Dust-covered, hidden, forgotten, or perhaps, intentionally concealed. The school was evacuated within minutes. Children were ushered outside, confused and frightened, teachers doing their best to stay calm. Parents arrived in a panic. Police, firefighters, and bomb technicians swarmed the building. Ranger sat quietly beside Mark now, his job done, eyes calm but watchful. The device turned out to be inactive, old, corroded, and non-functional. An abandoned explosive from decades earlier, placed there during a dark chapter in the town's past, back when threats had been real and fear had driven people to terrible choices. It had been sealed away, covered up, and slowly erased from memory. Until Ranger remembered for them. News spread fast. Headlines praised the brave K-9 who had potentially saved hundreds of lives. Interviews followed. Photos of Ranger appeared on social media, his calm, intelligent face framed by his badge. The town called him a hero. But that wasn't the part that changed everything forever. As the dust settled, the school district ordered a full inspection of the building. Walls were opened, records were reviewed, forgotten files were pulled from storage. And buried among those records was another secret, one far more human than mechanical. Years earlier, during the same troubled era when the device had been hidden, a young janitor named Samuel Carter had worked at the school. He had been quiet, kind, the kind of man who fixed broken desks without being asked and left extra pencils on teachers' desks. He had noticed the device being installed late one night by people who didn't belong there. He had tried to report it, tried to warn someone. No one listened. Instead, suspicion fell on him. He was questioned, then dismissed, then quietly pushed out of town, his reputation ruined by whispers and fear. Samuel left Lincoln Ridge with nothing but a toolbox and a broken heart. He died years later in another state, never knowing the truth would one day surface. When the school board learned this, silence filled the room. Guilt settled heavy in the air. The painting, the very one Ranger had torn apart, had been painted decades later as a symbol of unity, placed unknowingly over the place where an innocent man's life had been quietly destroyed. Mark couldn't stop thinking about it. Neither could Ranger, who kept returning to the spot whenever they visited the school afterward, sniffing gently, tail low, as if mourning something unseen. Moved by the discovery, the school did something unexpected. They reached out to Samuel Carter's only surviving family member, his granddaughter, Emily. She lived hundreds of miles away and had grown up hearing vague stories about a grandfather who lost everything in a town that had turned its back on him. She arrived at Lincoln Ridge unsure, guarded, carrying decades of inherited pain. What she found instead was a community changed. Students had written letters apologizing for a wrong they hadn't committed but now understood. Teachers stood in tears as they explained the truth. The principal took responsibility on behalf of the institution. And in the hallway where the painting once hung, there was now an empty space waiting to be filled. Emily was invited to help decide what should replace it. She chose a new painting, created by the students themselves. It showed a man kneeling to help a child tie her shoe, a dog sitting loyally beside him, and a wall being gently opened to let light in. At the bottom, in careful letters, were the words, "Truth always finds a way." On the day the painting was unveiled, Ranger was there. Older now, slower, but still steady. As the cloth was pulled away, the crowd applauded, some crying openly. Emily knelt beside Ranger and placed her hand on his head, whispering thank you, not just for her grandfather, but for the reminder that goodness could still rise from buried wrongs. The story didn't end there. The town established a scholarship in Samuel Carter's name. The school added ethics and empathy programs to its curriculum. Children learned not just about safety, but about courage, the quiet kind that speaks up even when no one wants to listen. And Ranger, he retired a year later, honored with a medal and a comfortable home. Mark often said that Ranger hadn't just sniffed out danger that day. He had uncovered truth. He had given a voice to someone long silenced. He had reminded everyone that compassion isn't just about preventing harm, it's about healing what was broken. Long after the headlines faded, people still talked about that day. Not as the day a dog ripped a painting, but as the day a community finally looked behind the walls it had built around its own conscience. And in that hallway, where children passed every morning beneath the new painting, there was a feeling, quiet, steady, and hopeful, that some lessons, once uncovered, could change everything forever.